Episode 2, we're ready to rock.
Yeah, rock and roll. Lots of stuff. Busy week.
Complicated and maybe a little bit controversial today. Here are our top 3 topics that we will be getting into in UnSpun. The speculation tax, lots of brouhaha about how long it's going to take you and I to fill out those forms.
Oh my God, my life.
I know, but don't go into it yet,
okay,
because I want to say the other 2 topics in our 3 in 3. Supposed to do 3 topics in 3 minutes. It's never going to happen. It's kind of like Matt Damon never being on Jimmy Kimmel, right? Our apologies to 3 in 3. This is going to take way longer than that. We're also going to talk about Port Coquitlam Mayor Brad West, what he's been saying about the Tri-City School Board trustees headed on an all-expenses-paid trip to China. We'll chime in on that. And of course, could we talk any more about this Burnaby by-election? I think that's going to dominate things.
It's a moving target.
It is. But let's start, George, shall we, with the speculation tax. What do we got? The homeowners grant, empty homes tax, and the speculation tax. And we have to opt out of these things, which makes people nervous.
It sounds great opting out of a tax, doesn't it? Really, it sounds wonderful. Yeah, it's a negative opt-in, opt-out kind of thing. That's how it's being spun. Effectively, I don't know who started the story, because actually in Vancouver we have the empty homes tax, which is in itself kind of a negative billing tax, where you
basically say you live in your home, right?
Yeah, if you don't fill the form, you get taxed. So it's similar, but that spin of this is a bad thing wasn't used in the city, but it's being used effectively, at least right now, because the media are all talking about this speculation tax, this tax being unfair because of the process, and that you have to fill out this long form, and it's complicated, and people will be confused or whatever, and potentially affecting the by-election in Nanaimo.
Now, you know way more about the politics behind this than I do, and how one wants to spin it one way and the other could, because people are saying that in the by-election in Nanaimo, where the speculation tax is horribly unpopular to begin with, makes the NDP government look bad, that it's happening right now.
Yeah,
because it is Kelowna, Vancouver Island, Kelowna, and Vancouver, right? That are
the main areas that would be affected by it. Yeah, it's kind of weird. I think there's many things to dig into, but first of all, yeah, politically not a wise move in the middle of a by-election to bring in something that we already know is pretty unpopular in certain markets, certainly in Nanaimo and Vancouver especially. What I find interesting right now is where we are with how it's being positioned as being unfair and how you fill out these forms, and how the media really picked up on that this week. You in politics, you quite often try to find ways to tell your story, to make the people in power, or if you're vice versa, the opposition, and to get your message out clearly. That's
called the spin.
That's called the spin. So unspinning this, I'm guessing this came from the BC Liberals as an approach to, they probably worked it and thought about it. What are the, they put on a board, what are the things we need to figure out here that are bad about this tax? They've already attacked other taxes, the school tax and all those things. Now we've got this new one. How do we attack it? How do we go after it?
How do we make people worry about this?
Exactly. So negative billing is something we all hate, right? You don't bill me until I get my services rendered.
And if we don't opt out, or we aren't aware that we must, which we will all apparently get a mailer from the provincial government at some point in the next couple of weeks.
How much is that, I wonder? The cost of that alone is probably a couple $1 million.
Good point. It's a good point. But people are fearful that they are going to somehow slip through the cracks if they erroneously fill out the form or what have you. There's a little bit of fear in there, but I'm going to take it back to the unspun in my head. I'll fill out the form. I want to stop speculation on our properties here in British Columbia that are using BC real estate basically as a stock market. There's a bunch of stuff going on that I'm certainly not well versed enough in it to explain en masse, but if that one form, and I actually, along with Patrick, one of our researchers and producers here on UnSpun, we actually went through and clicked on the form, found it in I think it was the Times Columnist in Victoria, and it's really not that complicated.
Yeah,
like it's really not.
I guess if you love tax and you like filling out forms,
I don't love tax and I don't like filling out forms.
I'm not a fan of, we can get into the politics of empty homes and all that stuff. I was very vocal in council about we're spending all this energy and time and creating all these taxes and creating all this administration for what represents in Vancouver less than 5% of homes. It's about 3% of homes are considered empty by a certain criteria. as opposed to putting in more energy and money and staff time into the 97% of the homes that are full. How do we build more of the 97% that people live in and that people can afford, as opposed to spending millions and millions of dollars and bureaucratic time dealing with a tax that represents only 3 to 4% of our in Vancouver.
So you're frustrated with the tax. Before you get to the form.
Yeah, and now you've got a form that's is negative billing, and it's long and it's complicated. Right. Not to mention the fact that what is an empty home, the way it's defined in this new tax is much more stringent than in Vancouver. As far as you can't rent to your children, and you can't rent to your friend, and you can't. That's not considered.
It needs to be your primary resident, and if it's not, then it's subject to this tax.
People who are scamming their way around these taxes by leasing out their home for $1 a year to their oldest child won't be able to do that in this tax.
But there was that feeling that there was a lot of shell game real estate going on. Like, are we really that naive as citizens that we are really creating something that is millions and millions of dollars to implement and manage and do and upset citizens by doing it, if it's really not going to impact the problem?
Well, yeah, the speculation and affordability and home ownership and all those things are a complicated, equation to go at it with one way or another and to attack it through taxation. I'm not a big fan of. I think it's better to focus on how do we build more homes that are affordable.
What a great way to move on to our next topic of three topics.
Did we make it 3 minutes?
Oh yeah, no, I think that was 7 minutes of first topic.
Okay.
Next up is we're going to talk about a politician in the Tri-Cities, Brad West from Port Coquitlam.
He's certainly been vocal.
He's being very vocal, like almost fearlessly so, when it comes to the Tri-Cities school board trustees accepting apparently something that's happened in the past, which is an all expenses paid trip to China to do what?
The research and find out about, it's really about getting some of these foreign students to come to spend a maximum amount of money to go through our school system. It's a moneymaker for school boards. Underwrites a lot of the administration and operations for schools in each city. And so it's an important part of the revenue model for schools, unfortunately. And Mayor West has been very vocal about that alone, saying that's not a good enough reason. But it brings up a lot of questions to me. One is, well, the one thing is that, first of all, Brad West feels very comfortable slamming and going after the Chinese government, which 2 years ago, when this stuff started brewing up, if you had done that, you would have been attacked as being racist. Right. And now it seems okay that we can attack the Chinese government. And I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it seems to be a new world order in Canada, especially given all this other stuff going on. But the other question that comes up to my mind, having been in office, is what is influence and what is corruption, and what things should you say no to, and what should you
so
yes
what do you
to?
Think?
Well, no, you don't take free trips ever.
That's pretty simple, George.
It seems to me that would be something where somebody is trying to influence you in some way, whether it be a great thing or a bad thing. It's not appropriate. How do you then vote on it if you have had some sort of influence and it's been financially based? This is the basic principles of conflict of interest that we are supposed to live by. Not only, certainly you having been a journalist and politicians live by similar rules. If there's a perception of conflict, then you are in conflict, whether it be money or anything. And so your job when you're in politics is really to focus on, is this inappropriate? I own a business, for example. I was very careful over the years to make sure that I wasn't putting myself in conflict and would, what they say, recuse yourself, a very weird word, from debates if I felt it was a conflict for me. And but mostly I tried not to take on clients that would be a conflict, because my role in office I felt I took very seriously, and I wanted to be careful, and so
you didn't even want to have the appearance of a conflict, and that there is certainly an appearance of a conflict
it's so
here.
Direct.
If it's so direct. If it's so important to the Tri-Cities and other school boards, let's be real, that international students do come to Vancouver and really do reinforce financially our school system in one form or another, then it should be the onus on those cities to send their trustees.
Send staff.
Send staff.
Don't send the politicians. Come on. What do you need to send your trustees to China for? What exactly are they going to come back? Come on. You need the money? Fine. Then build a marketing program and get the students here if that's what you want. Be honest about it. You don't need to go to China and research. It's a cash grab from foreign students for school districts. Admit it, live by it, and market it as that. But don't give me this BS about going there and learning about, no.
And on that, next topic in 3 and 3.
3 and 3,
Oh,
right?
I think we're like
3 and
17
50.
minutes into 3. Yeah, that's okay. Okay, let's talk about Burnaby.
Moving target, yeah.
Which one do you want to cover first here? Let's start with Karen Wang. How about
Well,
that?
there are two stories in Burnaby related to politicians, and they're both about redemption and making mistakes and things like that. So Karen Wang put out this thing on WeChat.
Which is like
it's a
Snapchat or text messaging, social media in China.
China, for Mandarin speaking mostly.
Very highly used.
Yes, and Gregor Robertson got a lot of trouble a few years ago when he joined it and suddenly had 90,000 followers that he apparently bought. But
that story at some point. Anyways, let's go back to Karen Wang.
So she put out this post that
Liberal
was,
representative.
She's running for office. What was it?
Still a mess.
Depending on when you're listening to this.
Yes.
And said basically in some relationship to ethnicity, and I'm not going to get into the details of it, but basically
it's a mess.
It's a mess. And
so maybe out of the equation, maybe an opportunity into the equation for a former politician who perhaps in recent past might have had some issues that might make a voter go, didn't Sven Robinson steal something?
Yeah.
Didn't he leave in sort of a shameful way, perhaps? But there's a much larger history that this man has brought to the table.
Yeah, and in both of those situations, I think it's amazing how, as a politician, you can go from being, a shining star in the case of, say, Sven Robinson, to in trouble, and sometimes it could be as innocuous as a tweet that you make, or in the case of Karen, Wang, that's something that's maybe inappropriate, and suddenly she's in the bad books and getting negative press. Sven Robinson stole a ring and
admitted it.
Stepped down. Had mental health issues. Admitted that. Yeah. Went through a whole process. No longer was in office after that, and now he's doing a comeback. And so the question is, do we accept Sven as a political candidate? Is he tarnished forever by this ring theft? And
I think that's something that maybe.
I don't know if you and I agree on this one.
Well, you know what? But we talked before the podcast. I'm just going to tell you. But you bring up some really good points. But I never talk about how I vote, and that's not because I'm in the media. It's just because I've never really done that. I don't really have an alliance or an allegiance that I use publicly out there. I assess the candidate and I follow my gut, my instinct.
But I'm sure she voted for me.
Of course I did. And that's
Wait
obvious.
a minute.
Hey, we got a laugh for the audience in studio. No, but I did feel that the most recent issues with Sven Robinson, with the theft, and not so much the mental health issues, because we're all talking about mental health and it shouldn't be stigmatized, but he stole. Like, do we need somebody in government that...
I believe he has a criminal record for it.
Yes.
This guy, I'm not even close to NDP in any respect. I think people know that.
They do.
But I also respect what it's like to be in opposition, and he was always in opposition, which is never easy. Wins are few and far between. Being effective is tough because you're always being, you don't get the stuff that you get if you're in power.
Yeah.
So here's a guy who was in office from 1979, and for I think 20 years more. He was an effective opposition MP, and effective on the ground in his community for years.
And when you say in his community?
In Burnaby.
Yes.
And so he was really...
he has heritage in so many ways.
Exactly. So you have to respect that, and you have to think back, and I think the voters in Burnaby in that riding will have to consider, and this is redemption. If he wins this, it's for him. He can get back to what he believes he's all about, which is an effective politician. Whether you agree with him or not politically, he was an effective ground game kind of door knocking, grassroots kind of politician. That's what he was good at.
And he was standing up for the LGBTQ community long before anybody was talking.
Way before anybody else. Made a huge impact on Canada in that respect. So, it's something that'll be interesting to watch to see how the voters in that community select if he is the candidate as an MP.
One of the many reasons why we do this podcast, UnSpun, because these conversations can give you some more insight. At our pre-meeting, I was saying, well, I don't know, that theft, but once we talked it through a little bit, and perhaps I wasn't as aware, because my time of being politically savvy wasn't in the 80s, because I was running around waitressing
Right.
all over Vancouver and not really paying that
Yes.
much attention. I'd
Right.
vote, but I wasn't really paying attention the
Right.
way I do today. And so I'm glad that you reminded me of those things, because it is on us to do our homework and do our due diligence when it comes to voting. So we thank you for watching our podcast, UnSpun. This segment of UnSpun is brought to you by
UnSpun.
UnSpun.
Just so you know, this is a venture that we're following, and we're looking for sponsors. So if you're interested in sponsoring UnSpun, contact us through theorca.ca.
Yes.
But right now, it's brought to you by Amanda and Patrick.
Amanda and Patrick.
Who are in the
and
back
Curve
room.
Communications.
And Curve.
We can do
Plug,
Curve Communications.
Curve
We're going to do this
Communications,
podcast anyway, but we'd love to be able to mention,
Sure.
enter your name, your
Yes.
company name here. Okay, mean tweets.
Yes. So you're listening. You're watching.
Right.
UnSpun.
So we got to give our.
You're watching UnSpun. UnSpun at UnSpun Podcast is on Twitter. My Twitter handle is not as good as Jody's because I have to do the underscore at George_Affleck, and yours is
Jody Vance. JodyVance.
Yeah.
You got the underscore.
I know.
But that makes you a higher score. The kid that stole George Affleck's handle. I love it. But we communicate on Twitter. And what was the first one that we got? Or you've got
mine.
it. Yeah, there's yours. Okay, this is a George mean tweet. So.
Mine was basically regarding Jody Wilson-Raybould.
Right.
And I said on Twitter, it's a demotion. And
because of the cabinet shuffle.
Yes, the cabinet shuffle that she got sent from justice down to veterans. A respectable portfolio, to be sure.
No doubt.
But
politically speaking, in your view,
on the realm of hierarchy, it's a demotion.
Right.
And so I put that out there. And I did it early, and I felt like there wasn't many people. Most media and people were falling for what I believe was spin. Was that no, it's going to be great for her.
What else is she gonna say?
It's a very important portfolio, and they need somebody with her caliber in there to really. And I'm like, really?
But can you imagine if she stood up at that podium after the shuffle and said, "I'm really angry with the Prime Minister, and this is a demotion"?
That would be awesome.
That would be awesome,
I mean,
and it will never happen.
Not if you're, well, that has happened in politics. There are politicians, I can think of a couple, that, go against their party's, the caucus. But in the case of this one, she was supportive, and she's like looking forward to the new job. And I'm sure she'll do a great job. But you know what it does? It raises an interesting, she's in a spin ride, or in a swing riding.
Yes.
Shaughnessy, which was conservative last time, could go conservative again in October. And so it will be interesting to see who runs there and how they may use this as a tool to spin, to make her look weaker and say, you know what, you had a senior minister, now you have somebody who's been demoted perhaps on her way out from any ministry. Why would you vote for that person? And that would be my guess is that will be the strategy on the ground in that riding.
To use this as she's on her way out, so don't.
Yeah, it's one of those, and I think the Conservatives will pick up a few ridings in BC likely in the next election, and that's for sure one.
So what's the mean tweet that you got when you said it's a demotion?
No, I got a bunch, but I had another one. We had another one. The second mean tweet was the guy who spent when we were talking about the name of the show, and he tweeted out, "Unspun my."
You can say ass.
Oh, can you? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. My ass. And
he said, "Unspun my ass."
Unspun my ass, which was Nick H. Red Suspenders 81. I guess Red Suspenders 0 to 80 was taken. So he was, and we kind of played with him a little bit, and he's offered to come on the show.
Has he? Awesome.
To do an interview.
Keep tweeting us.
Yeah, we don't mind.
Interestingly enough, though, my mean tweet, also from Nick.
Oh, okay. You know.
Nick follows. I didn't realize that it was the same guy until because we did.
Okay, Nick's
apparently our meetings
biggest
are,
fan.
Our
biggest fan.
We'll see if he's continuing to follow us and engaging with us.
Yes.
I would like it if you would.
Sure.
Because I love this one. Because I had been going through, I love my Twitter. I love being on there. I read and follow many. George_Affleck being one of them. But big U.S. stories and papers and people. Everybody from Ellen DeGeneres to, Rachel Maddow. And all in between. Philip Bump is another that I really like at the
Barack Obama, who's come to town.
Obama's amazing. Tristan Hopper being in the Canadian media as well. Daniel Dale, who informs us every time Donald Trump lies, which I find very satisfying.
See, you're more of a follower. I'm more just of a tweeter. I tend to just spout off on Twitter. You actually read a lot of it.
Well, I do, because if people are really talking about this stuff, then that's good content for a talk show. And when I'm doing CKNW or I'm whatever, that is something that I will put out as a good talker because people want to know and maybe they didn't see it. So Nick H says to me after I retweeted something from the US, he said, Jody, for the sake of variety, cover anything else than American current events. Try, for example, making an opinion about the recent cabinet shuffle in Canada.
Did it.
It can be any opinion at all, just something other than this over and over again. Interesting point, though. I did go to Nick's profile. Lots of retweets of U.S. political stuff. I'm just saying. I'm not obsessed with U.S. politics, but I do.
Suspenders 81.
Red suspenders. Keep watching, keep listening, and don't forget to subscribe.
Subscribe.
And also this one really caught me yesterday in reading through Twitter. This isn't a mean tweet as much as it is somebody that I follow and I have great respect for because he also was a sports
I'm
journalist.
up and down on my respect for this guy.
Hey,
we've had a few battles.
Back it up.
On Twitter.
He's my buddy.
Yeah.
Gary Mason of the Globe and Mail tweeted, holy shit. This is absolutely engaging stuff. The Mark Emery story is being radically rewritten before our eyes.
Yeah, that's brutal. And then he means the Mark Emery story. Literally, I think is a history of Mark Emery and the impact he's had.
The Prince of Pot.
The Prince of Pot in the
We
marijuana
talked about
industry.
him
He goes
last
to
week.
jail for it. Yeah, that's right. And now there's this whole sexual harassment Me Too thing happening, which is he's handling in an interesting way. You
know how he's handling it, in my opinion? He's handling it like Gian Gomeshi handled it when it happened to him. You should not go on Facebook and write 1,200 words in defense of yourself when more than one individual is coming forward with a very similar story. The Me Too movement is not going away. Nobody's going to just say, it's okay if you say you've never done this and you must be mistaken. Like the spotlight only gets brighter when you try and just put something up on social media. I know a lot of media across Canada right now are trying to get in touch with them and they're all telling the story and saying, and we've reached out, and to this point have received no return phone call. Like you gotta call the people back to have this. Or you do the right thing by the people who are accusing you of this and hear what they're saying, or maybe apologize.
Yeah, there's lots of ways to do it. What's interesting in several of the factors this week, which was a lot of it related to social media, was the impact being in the public's eye and things that happen and how your whole life can change. And in the case of Mark Harrison, or not Mark Harrison, different Mark.
Oops.
Mark Emery.
I love a podcast. Yes.
He's, that's a whole moving, we'll see where that goes, but,
Well, last week we were talking about whether or not he should be able to have a business license to sell cannabis when he had a criminal record. And now he's got a whole nother level to defend himself on. So we'll be keeping up on that.
I know, but who wants to be in the public eye in any form, really, given these things that are happening this week?
At least you and I, when we asked to be in the public eye, because we took on the position or the job of being a broadcaster, being a politician. But now everybody's a celebrity with social media being what it is. Everybody's a broadcaster, not necessarily knowing the responsibility that comes with it.
That's right, 100%.
So you have to be able to back up what you're talking about or completely be unspun. Which gives me an opportunity to re-welcome you to UnSpun. This is a podcast that George and I will be doing on a weekly basis. You can find us on theorca.ca. Also subscribe on YouTube or download if you want to do the podcast, the entire podcast.
iTunes and Google Play.
And when you go to theorca.ca, I write a column every Wednesday. It's called The Middle. And this week, we touched on it last week in terms of the drunk driving laws, the new federal drunk driving laws. And you can read the whole story at theorca.ca, but basically, thank you, trying to figure out where the goalposts might be moved here. Because when I was a kid, didn't even have my driver's license yet. A friend visited from Alberta, and we went out as teens do, in the parents' Cordoba in Tsawwassen.
Sweet ride.
And we got hit by a drunk driver. And had the seatbelt laws not just come into effect, like the new seatbelt checks, because we joked with our friend from Alberta, haha, in BC you have to wear a seatbelt. Had we not worn our seatbelts, we would have all died, just as an aside. But I saw the only person in the vehicle that hit us run from his vehicle. We knew the truck, but small town. We knew the truck, we knew the dude, we knew the party he'd been at, everything. But he ran from the scene, went home, and the police could only charge him with leaving the scene of an accident. They couldn't charge him with drunk driving because the laws were you had to be on the scene. So on one hand, in my little I walked away story, I get it. I can only imagine what it's like for somebody who's lost a loved one in a situation like this. They want those stricter laws. Like, I get it. But these seem so far, because here in BC and specifically Vancouver, ride sharing, we can't get to and from where we're going.
Are we going on there?
Yeah, well, I'm hopping on the bus. I got my Compass card.
There were 2 reports to council this week.
Yes.
One was motion, and you know, and your piece is really interesting, and I would encourage everybody to read it. And it's moving for sure. But in council this week about getting around is challenging. So the drinking and driving thing, you know, like how do we get around? How do we make it easier to get around? Uber, we don't have it. Taxis, the report to council in Vancouver this week was focused on what we learned was that the new rules by the province is going to be actually more difficult for cities to get taxi licenses, to increase taxi licenses. So not only do we not have Uber, we actually are making it more complicated to create taxi licenses. And then we had Jean Swanson's motion about making transit free for younger people and people
18
who can afford it.
Under 18s, transit free.
And it passed unanimously, I believe.
I love that. I want that for well, kids think they're invincible, and if they're not going to care that it's 0.08 criminal, 0.05 motor vehicle. The laws are super strict, and now you can be pulled over for no reason at all, just because there's 5 kids in a car. I'm pulling you over and I'm testing.
Yeah, but it's
that could ruin your life.
No, absolutely. But
I made mistakes when I was
how
a kid.
we, you know, this socialist sort of approach to how we administer things in our is getting more and more. The taxpayers are having to underwrite all these things that are being moved over into. So if you remove a fee, and as TransLink has said, that money, millions and millions and millions, has to come from somewhere.
Let's put the carbon tax in there.
Yeah, well, that's the carbon tax. So we have about 15 new taxes as of January from 15? The NDP. And the carbon tax is another one that starts April. And 15? That one used to be cash or revenue neutral. Now it's going to be a revenue maker for the province. And it's not even directed into specific things. Yeah, 15 new taxes. Yay, tax. Woohoo, we all love tax and filling out forms. Back to the beginning of our show.
Oh, do you see what he did there? He did it all. If you're just listening to a portion of UnSpun, you can listen to all of it on theorca.ca. You can subscribe on YouTube, right? You just
right below.
Right there. And you can tweet at us at UnSpun Podcast on Twitter. You can follow along or tweet at us. Clearly, we love to read your tweets, especially Nick. At Jody Vance or at
George_Affleck.
Yes, and iTunes.
And theorca.ca has its own Twitter handle as well. And in iTunes and Google Play and Facebook and Instagram. Just not that WeChat.
No, you did it again.
We're not going there.
Way to circle it around. I got to say, though, when you do give us your thoughts on the podcast, we take them to heart. So we're going to chop up the podcast into little consumable bites for those who are listening on the go and want to pick and choose what they're listening to, but also have the complete podcast for those who want to commute, because that was your vision. I want people to be able to commute with us.
Yeah, for sure. And then we'll probably put them on Facebook as well. I'm not sure.
We'll see. Do all the things. So this podcast is brought to you by
us again for now.
Us again.
We're making a lot of money today.
We are.
And
we've already won, George.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Let's wrap it up. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.